So do you think that all companies should be product led? When should they be product led? When should they not be product led for growth? I mean, what's the
That's
thesis?
it's a fun conversation in the community. At some point down the line, everything will become product led. That's generally the preference of most consumers, regardless of vertical. I don't think it'll ever be 100% of everything will be product led, but I mean, I think that's the direction I think most companies are going. We're certainly seeing it in B2B SaaS. That's been definitely the trend over the last, particularly since COVID. And it makes sense for a lot of companies. Now, there's a lot of different aspects of product led growth. I guess you could make the argument that everything will have some form of it at some point, at least most, nearly all successful companies. We're definitely going to see a lot more of it. Seems to be the buzzword, at least of the quarter, probably before that, but I think it'll be the new thing to talk about next year.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, of course.
So what is product growth? Let's start with the basics.
Yeah, start with the basics. Yeah. So it's not as complex. Well, I often joke with people over the last several years about growth in general. You could ask 20 different growth people what growth is, and you'll get 24 different answers. Like it feels like it actually, I'd say in the last year or so, it does feel like people are starting to come to a little bit more of a consensus. But product growth is something that product led growth specifically is something that has certainly kind of become more popular here in the last couple of years. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It is scaling your company it's scaling with the product itself at the very forefront. So historically, we think of growth, or at least we think of a growth of a company through sales and marketing being the primary drivers. In a product-led growth approach, you're simply using your product first. Now, of course, there could be something in between the user, and that doesn't mean that you can't use a marketing channel to get a user there in some way. But at the forefront of everything is the product, and not just the forefront. As the user kind of progresses through their journey, the product is always central to all of that. And product-led growth companies are companies that really focus on the product, on building their entire teams around the product. So that's when you start to see.
Give me for instance, like what are some of those companies that do a good job of product-led growth, and then maybe some that do a bad example of not product-led, like something that's been scaled not based on product, just to kind of anchor it on real business use cases.
Yeah. So if you think about companies like Segment, or even like product analytics companies like Amplitude or Mixpanel, Amplitude and Mixpanel have made a serious effort to focus on specifically product-led growth and call it out actively, within their material. But they do a great job with it. That's a product where you have an opportunity to experience some sort of freemium model to begin with. You might begin, and you might not ever talk to a salesperson. You might not ever talk to a salesperson at an Amplitude or a Mixpanel potentially. But once you reach a certain threshold, as you're eventually getting upsold over time in so many ways, as you upgrade that's a better way to put it. As you upgrade your plan or your feature sets, at some point you want to you're introduced to an enterprise plan. At that point, you're probably going to talk to a salesperson. But the point of that is the salesperson isn't at the forefront. They're not. And I'm generalizing a little bit here because Amplitude and Mixpanel and those companies do have sales teams that will go out for enterprise clients outright. But when you think about smaller companies that often sign up for an Amplitude or a Mixpanel or any product analytics suite, then they're coming on board, they're experiencing it for nothing to begin with at the earliest stages, and then slowly upgrading over time. The sales teams only interact well after the fact as the company's growing, and that's it.
It's super interesting. It's also timely. I've been reading Walter Isaacson. I always mix up his name.
Walter Isaacson.
The Elon Musk biography, and
sitting right over there.
Elon Musk. Yeah, it's a good read. Definitely dig into it if you haven't. But Elon is a very big proponent of, I guess, what's called product-led growth, where his whole focus is if we make an exceptional product, we won't need to focus on marketing or sales. And I think even to this day, Tesla has spent $0 on marketing and maybe on sales. I don't know about that. But so is it really about just making an exceptional product and then the users will come? Or is there more to it in terms of the actual growth part? How do you foster that growth? Or is it just really about understanding what the users needs and then giving them what they want?
It's somewhere in between. I mean, the old adage of, if you build it, they will come. I think most of us have experienced that not necessarily being true. You can build something and people won't come. You can build something amazing and people still won't see it. But at the core of it, you do have to have that. I think the difference, that middle line though, is that you have to build everything around it. You have to build that product and you have to support it with multiple channels, not just marketing channels or sales channels, but every function of a business is supporting that product. And that's the big difference. And I think, like, another example of a company that's done a really good job. So, I previously worked at a point of sales hardware focused company. In that space, there is a quintessential example of a product led growth company there in hardware, which is kind of rare, is Square. Square's done a great job of, that's how everybody knows Square is. However many years ago, they handed out those dongles. Anybody could get them for free. And next thing you know, you were, swiping credit cards left and right. You've got a business you're running at really no cost up front. Obviously, they've matured a ton since then. It's evolved to a much larger company with a much larger suite of products. But at its core, that's what it was. It was a product-led growth company, or a product-led company for sure. I love that example because I feel like it's kind of hard. It's often hard to find hardware-based companies when you talk about product-led growth. But I can't think of a better one than Square and how they went about
it. Yeah, and maybe you throw Tesla in there too, or do you see that as a different use case?
It's actually a good question. I mean, like it is, like by the definition we just put out there, it is. It's not the classic example you think of though, because I think they have. It is. Yeah. I guess when you really think about it, it is. I think it probably is not the one that usually comes to mind though, because, as we usually think about product-led growth companies, especially today over the last couple of years, it's been hottest. That form of growth has been hottest in really B2B SaaS. It's software. And so I guess in that sense, yeah, you're right. Tesla is a good example of it.
It's fascinating to think about. And I mean, it makes sense in that if you focus on the product and you support the product and you build an experience that is amazing, and then you need to make sure that there's kind of the peripheral support of not just building the product and no one shows up, but you build the product and you lead with the product and you talk about the product, and you market the product. That is a successful strategy to invest in what you're building in a deeper way, rather than maybe, building out a ad generating machine that kind of, and a sales force. Those are investing in other assets that can support it, but it's a different overall thesis strategy.
Yeah.
Do you? Yeah, go ahead.
And to even take this a step further, it even more so is, I mean, you think about like a traditional kind of, the traditional model with car companies. It's like you there's always a middleman involved, right? And you want to buy a Toyota, Ford, whoever, you're going through a middleman. You're going through a dealer. Tesla is the one company you don't go. One of the, I guess there are a couple now, but it's the example of a company that isn't going through a dealer. You're going right to the source for the product.
So do you think that all companies should be product led? When should they be product led? When should they not be product led for growth? I mean, what's the thesis?
It's a fun conversation in the community, because there's some people that think inherently that that's the direction, that at some point down the line, everything will become product led. That's generally the preference of most consumers, almost regardless of vertical. Now, I don't think it'll ever be 100% of everything will be product led, but I mean, yeah, I think that's the direction I think most companies are going. We're certainly seeing it in B2B SaaS. That's been definitely the trend over the last, particularly since COVID. And it makes sense for a lot of companies. Now, there's a lot of different aspects of product-led growth. So I guess you could make the argument that everything will have some form of it at some point, at least nearly all successful companies. It's a copycat league, right? So as we see that some companies do well with certain aspects of what other companies in those verticals will adopt. In terms of like what kinds of companies should be adopting, or different, or what kinds of companies should be adopting, or how they should be adopting it. That's where things get really interesting, because where product-led growth is um, let's say it's, you know, the future of growth for, or it's really already here. It's the kind of growth that we're kind of seeing, you know, for a lot of companies. At the same time, like I said, there's a lot of variations, and just because a pure play product led growth approach works for one company doesn't necessarily mean it's best for another. You talk about enterprise sales teams have to be involved at some point, or should be involved at some point in a lot of cases. Not all the time, but I'd say in the majority of cases, it's nice to have a sales team kind of layered on top of it. So that's kind of been the next thing that, you know, you hear a lot about. Isn't just a PLG model, but it's product led sales. And how do you kind of morph those two worlds together, a sales world and kind of the product world? And I think that's where things get interesting as well, because you've got this merger of kind of two very distinctly different approaches that are kind of coming together to kind of form this hybrid model. And it works. You know, I think you see some companies are kind of moving towards it. Some a little bit more controversial than others. I think was it Airtable? I think somewhat recently announced that was kind of the model they were going to be moving forward to. You're pushing more for enterprise accounts as opposed to their traditional, very PLG centric model. So I think it's probably something we'll see. It's something we're definitely going to see a lot more of. It seems to be the buzzword of the, at least of the quarter. Probably before that, but I think it'll be the new thing to talk about next year.
What's the history of how product-led growth kind of came about? Because for me, you know, I was in Silicon Valley in 2012 or so, 2012 through 2015, 2016. And one of the buzzwords at that time was growth hacking. Everyone was a growth hacker and, you know, doing whatever the hell that meant. But I'm one. Yeah, I'm generating growth through like hacky means with low cost.
Did it drive me nuts? I hated that term. It drove me crazy.
I mean, and honestly, I'm so ignorant. I thought that product-led growth was maybe kind of in that same vein of kind of taking, you know, growth hacking approaches to your product or something to that effect. But, you know, this is extremely helpful to kind of understand a little bit more about the basis of it. But like, what's the origination of this movement? This, you know, this driving forward every decision almost of growing the company through the product lens. What's the historical context of it?
Elijah, I love this question. I was just nerding about this yesterday with some people.
Figured of all people, you would know the answer to it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I think it kind of like historically, I think most people would deem kind of the original growth team was the Facebook growth team. Alex Schultz, Chamath Palihapitiya, that squad. And I think you can trace everything back to that. And that was a team at Facebook that was focused on one goal of increasing usage and getting their user count. I think they were trying to get to 100 million at the time. Like that was the objective. And they were a lot of the principles they applied there are the same things that we all apply in PLG today. Identifying a North Star metric, just focusing on that North Star metric, very quantitative, understanding exactly what's going to get you to, you know, whatever is going to drive your user to stickiness, to stick around and be a, you know, long time user, high retention rates. Like that was their focus. They figured out that, all right, if we get you know, a user to, I think it was 7 friends in 14 days or whatever it was, or maybe 10 friends in 14 days, I forget the exact, then we know that there is a significantly higher percentage that user is going to stick around for the next, again, forget the numbers, 12 months or whatever it is, or forever really for Facebook, as we know. And a lot of those practices are what we do today. And I think everything in between, you know, it started off there with those growth teams. I similarly was in San Francisco about that time. And so there was a lot of, I think is some of that stuff kind of started to get out and people started to, you know, kind of share knowledge a bit and understand. I mean, that was my early days and very small startups was like, you know, my career actually started off in marketing and user acquisition. And so it was like, I remember I was trying to figure out how the hell to like optimize these campaigns and realizing like, this is such a waste of time. There's things that are so much more centric to the user journey and like in turn, the product itself. That's how you can make significant change, which eventually brought me into product work. But in that time, and about that time, at some point, those mid 20 teens, you started to hear people started to talk about growth hacking, and that was the way.
Yep.
Growth hacking is just marketing. That's all it is. That's, you know, and that's what drove me crazy about it.
With a low budget.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. Yeah, it's intern marketing, like that's what it is. But yeah, and that word kind of got thrown around a bit, I think, just because it was marketers. It's a lot of marketers. We were coming up with a new marketing word, I guess, or marketing a new word for it. And from there, I think just some really smart people just started to apply it at different companies across different verticals. And you see different aspects of it across the spectrum. I mean, from even you talk about like in the gaming industry, gamification. I mean, a lot of the principles there are same things, or at least similar to what B2B companies apply in a PLG model. You're still focusing on retention. You're still focusing on that user engagement, at least ideally. There's certainly aspects of high churn in gaming companies for sure, and a little bit more of a focus on user acquisition campaigns. But regardless, the general frameworks are there. And so there's a lot of crossover, but a lot of that all kind of comes back to those initial growth teams at Facebook and the work they were doing and what their focuses were on. And then we were all like, oh shit, look at this. Like this is a framework that really works, and you can actually kind of formulate it and work with different companies and apply these same frameworks and help them scale in similar fashions, almost regardless of vertical or industry. So
I love frameworks because they do exactly that. They abstract the principles, the lessons outside of a particular domain, a particular company, a particular industry, and say these are the meta steps that you need to follow to achieve this kind of overall objective.
Exactly.
For product-led growth, what is that playbook? What does that kind of, these are the core tenets and principles, start here, do this, find a North Star metric. Like what are the high level bullets for someone who's less familiar with the concept?
You said the first one. I think it's the most important. I think a lot of time is identifying a North Star metric. And there's a couple different camps on like thinking about North Star metrics. Well, actually, I'll list kind of the steps out, and we'll come back to North Star. But identifying your North Star metric is super important, regardless. And beyond just growth work, I think identifying a North Star metric is hugely beneficial for teams for a whole variety of reasons. I think it's just a healthy thing to do for any company. But identifying a North Star metric, onboarding users and figuring out the onboarding process, the retention of those users, kind of the activation, and then figuring out how to keep them around. Very generally speaking, like that's kind of the process. You get them in, you figure out how you get them to activate, how they find that aha moment, and then how do you keep them around? And that's kind of it, like at the highest levels. And with that North Star metric, like I said, there's a couple different camps, and some people that think that hey, a North Star metric should be identified at the highest level. Your company should identify your North Star, and everybody sticks to it. And I think ideally that's a perfect world. It's just not always likely. I certainly have
generate more revenue or get more user signups or something like that.
Yeah, there's a couple things to it, and I think you have to. There's usually when I talk to companies about identifying that North Star metric, there's a couple things we try to stick to. We try not to identify a revenue metric ever. When you start to have companies that identify revenue, and that's the most common answer too. If you ask somebody, what's your revenue, or what's your North Star metric? Revenue, or it's a revenue related metric, which as a CEO or a founder of a company totally makes sense. Like, right. I mean, that's what, I'm beholden to my stakeholders. Like I'm reporting on that revenue. That's what they want to know about. So of course my North Star metric is going to be revenue. But the problem with revenue is that it's typically a little bit more short-sighted, like the common example that when people talk about this stuff is like, all right, well, great. If that's my North Star metric, then I'll just cover my site in ads. And this is very early 2000s, late or 90s internet. Like I'll just cover my website in ads, and that'll be the quickest way I can get revenue. I'll form some partnerships. And
you get cash now, but you sacrifice the quality of the product,
exactly,
and the user experience, and everything else down the road.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you're identifying that North Star metric, find something that's very important to the user, that signifies some level of importance, that aha moment should align or be the North Star metric itself. So you want it to be important to the user. You want it to be something that can clearly show success if you're showing it to a board or anything. So that's one of the things that I recommend for startups is like, whatever your metric is, as we're talking about it, just remember it's got to go up and to the right. I don't want to have like a 1.1 to 1.2 to 1 point, like whatever it is, like some metric that's like relatively stable. It's got to look like it goes up and to the right. Just visually, it's got to be aesthetically pleasing, and I want to see it go up, and so does your board. It just looks better and it just feels better. But so it's got to be something that very clearly shows success. It correlates the user to the success of the user, but also correlates the success of the business. So inherently, but like those are the things you're looking for. You want it to be something that a user sees. If a user's making that action, that means they're happy. And if they're happy, then hopefully that means if you're structuring your business right, then you're setting up all your triggers and kind of revenue opportunities around those happy moments. So anyway, so there's that. But so going back to kind of like the couple different camps of thought, I think there's the idea that you have that North Star metric that as a company you identify and everybody sticks to it. And when I've seen it deployed that way, it's a beautiful thing. You have your teams are aligned. It helps in meetings. It helps like reduces time just talking about what you should be working on. Like people can go in their own separate teams and separate meetings or whatever. And they inherently, everybody knows that no matter what project they're working on, or even if they finish one project and they're trying to think about the next one, they don't have to ask, their manager or someone else, what they should be working on. They go, inherently, I know that this project is going to be more effective to our North Star metric than this other thing. So that's what I'm going to work on. So it streamlines everything. So ideally it's company wide, but that's not always easy to do. And this is kind of where the other camp comes into place. It's like, listen, if it's not easy to do, then sometimes is it okay to have a kind of growth team specific metric or a team specific North Star metric? If you can't have a company one, then fine, make it a team one. I think that's totally fine as well. But I oftentimes with that, the question that kind of comes up is, well, what if it has to move? What if you have to change it? So like, what if Uber says, one team saying, all right, great, our North Star metric, Uber does have a single North Star metric. I think there's, at least at one point, theirs was like rides completed. But let's say they had like, somebody had pickups and one team has pickups and one team has deliveries or something. One could be supply side, one could be demand side. It's a little bit different, but there's enough correlation that it kind of comes in line. But there could be a team that might rotate, or their priorities might change a little bit, and that North Star metric might have to change a little bit with it. Maybe a team's focused more on acquisition one year, and maybe they're focused a little bit more on retention the next year. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just every time you make that switch that there's some efficiencies you lose. You kind of build some expertise if you're a team all working on one North Star metric. So it's important that if you do pick one, it's static long enough that you can build enough, your teams can build expertise around it and understand. But if you need to switch, you just be very cognizant of the cost of that. So
if you are in the first camp and you have your entire company rallied around a single ordinating principle, a single goal, a single North Star metric. I think metric is actually important to include in that name because it's something that has to be measurable by its definition.
Exactly, yeah.
So if you are in that camp, is this something where you pick it, you stick with it forever? Or is this something that should shift? Is this something that should evolve? And also, maybe too many questions here, but are there bad North Star metrics that you mentioned revenue is kind of not the right kind. But if I focus on, say, user acquisition, right? Or decrease the number of churn, the number of people that leave my system each month, right? And you just pick that metric and you focus on it and everyone focuses on that. Are there certain ones which are better than others? Or is it like any of these can be good because it's all going to move the product in the right direction?
Well, you just answered it right there. Is as long as it's moving the product in the right direction. You could certainly pick a North Star metric that doesn't. And in that case, it's a bad North Star metric. So I think that's the thing you have to keep in mind. And that's where kind of a little bit more the danger of it. It's team specific. And that's one of the things about if you identify a single North Star metric across the entire company, then you can break that down across teams. So, So like I ran growth at a company.
But maybe not the reverse where you build up from multiple scattered team North Stars. Right.
Yeah. Right. So like I ran growth at a company called Minibar Delivery. We did alcohol deliveries. So like you think of something like that, where like, all right, our North Star metric was deliveries completed. So, or it was just essentially deliveries. So the acquisition team could focus on getting a user to that point. And so their kind of a team North Star there could be essentially a first time delivery, getting new users. But on the retention side of the business, that team is focused on second delivery. Like the most important thing to them is getting a second order placed, not necessarily the first. So like it's a little bit different, inherently taking a step back, it might sound like the same thing, but like when you really, when you're looking at it, you're like, no, those are two separate teams focused on two very different things. And within those teams, you could break that down even further if you wanted to. Our team wasn't big enough where we really needed to do that, but you can see how it applies. So you're single, if you, and then just to add the extra level of complexity, if you are ever changing your North Star metric at any level, then that reverberates across all the teams that roll up into it. So, but bottom line is, yes, as long as you have something that is matching all the things we talked about earlier, it's clearly correlating to some sort of aha moment for the user. It's clearly correlating to revenue and success of the product and driving development and growth of the product, then you're doing the right thing.
To really anchor in the definition of product-led growth, compare product management with product growth to me, and maybe explain it to me like I'm 5. Because, a lot of the things that you're describing are similar in principle to my understanding of product management, but there's clearly a distinction. I'm curious on how you define, A versus B and the differences between the two.
Honestly, I really don't. And I
Fair
think
enough.
if you would have asked me that question a couple of years ago, I would have said there's a difference. I think I would have probably put my foot down and said there's much more of a difference. But today, I don't think. I think that's kind of the beauty of it too, is that it's effectively been the merger of multiple disciplines all kind of coming into one, but it's largely under principles of product management. So I think, like, if anything, it's more just a specialization of product than anything else. I think that's probably where we've landed today.
Yeah, that's helpful because a lot of the precepts are very similar. Now,
Mhm.
product management includes maybe writing ticket requirements for an engineer. Maybe it takes a more granular approach to making sure X, Y, and Z gets done for this button. The objective for this button is that when you click it, it's a very small delay before you get to the next page, and then
Yeah.
you get the sign up flow or whatever. But that's just kind of a microcosm of applying the product led growth principles, which is really making a good product, right? Making
Yeah.
a good product.
Yeah.
But you're kind of then expanding that, like you said, to multi-disciplines of marketing and maybe even sales, and you're kind of bringing these other disciplines so that the entire company is kind of aligned against that same framework of decision making.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, so at Honest, we are, quick plug, honestprod.com. Everybody check us out. That's basically our philosophy. Is our whole thesis is that your product strategy is your growth strategy. That's it. And so when we work with startups or companies of any size, I mean, that's what we talk about. It's like, listen, we'll solve your growth problem, or at least we'll try to solve whatever your growth problem is. But understand that in trying to solve your growth problem, what we're really talking about is a product problem. In the majority of cases, not always the case. Maybe you actually have in a more mature company, if you have your product strategy, if it's very well focused, you're doing really well. You got a lot fewer marketing problems or growth problems per se, but not always the case. But in general, yeah, that's kind of how we look at it. Your product strategy is your growth strategy. Product is growth. And you're talking about the similarities between, like, or the similarities, the overlap between a traditional PM and a growth PM, or just product led growth in general. You think about, even if I'm hiring for those roles and I think about the skill sets that I want, like, it's effectively the same thing. And if I'm asking for a superpower for for a PM, I want someone to be I want prioritization to be their, a superpower. And I want that whether it's a PM, and I especially want that if it's a growth, if it's a growth PM. That's one of the most important things, you want out of it, because you're running a lot of experiments. You're focusing on growth loops and trying to understand how users are engaging, how you're going to increase retention, things like that. Focusing on a couple of those points we mentioned earlier, onboarding, retention. So yeah, there's a ton of overlap. That's why it's like today, like I said, a few years ago, I might have felt a little bit differently, maybe out of just stubbornness or something. I don't know. But today, I mean, yeah, it's tough to make it an argument. Otherwise, it's effectively the same.
You're embracing your wayward cousins of another name.
That's right. Yeah.
With Honest or with some other company that you've worked in before, how do you get over that gap? You talked about how revenue is typically a short-term goal, right? It's kind of more myopic. It's more, let's get this here and now. I think often I've talked with a lot of founders who are also focused on features. I want this feature. This feature is going to be so cool. Everyone's going to love this feature. And I think a lot of that mindset comes from a more short-term focus on value creation. Now, there is a reality for the need of short-term objectives, short-term goal achievement, because without it, maybe you don't fundraise the next round, right? So
Yeah.
maybe if you focus on the long-term value creation, the long-term retention of your customers, well, you don't make it to the point where it even matters because you didn't focus on the right distance, not super near-term goals, not super long-term, but kind of right in the middle. How do you get a company, and whether this is through honest or a past experience, how have you kind of engaged in that balance between short-term value creation versus long-term value creation? And also sometimes short-term value can sacrifice long-term
Mm-hmm.
efforts.
I, a lot of people that work with me know or that have worked with me know there's a framework that I push on every single company, and I shove it down people's throats. I've mentioned it on panels. I've mentioned it all over. A lot of people that know me joke about it. But I push for the ICE framework: impact, confidence, ease, or effort. There's ice, rice. There's more with more letters. They keep adding them on, but they're all, the same principles are all there. But the bottom line is you do have to find some way to prioritize it and
Well,
weigh.
yeah, break that down because I'm not familiar with ICE.
Okay,
So
so
impact, confidence, ease.
yeah, so it's a quantitative way to try to prioritize whatever items you might have in your list of new features you want to build or experiments you want to run or whatever it is. So you're effectively just scoring everything based on, in the ICE model, three different categories. Impact, so that's your impact to your North Star metric. So I'll use Minibar as an example, since we mentioned them earlier. If our North Star is deliveries, then I'm going to score that somewhere between, use whatever scale you want, but we would use 1 through 9. Confidence, how confident am I that we're actually going to be able to accomplish this build or this experiment? And then ease, in terms of resources, how easy is this? And we'd actually kind of break that down even further. Monetary resources, personnel, and time. So you kind of weigh all those things together, and you kind of come out with some kind of score to kind of quickly decide, all right, is this something that is really worth focusing on, or is there something else that might be a little bit, maybe it's short term, but maybe we know we can knock this out. It's not going to take a lot of resources. Maybe it's got a lower impact, but we can knock it out in a sprint, So maybe that's something we can just do really quick. It fits in the rest of our roadmap. So that's, I try to work with companies on that, establishing, and honestly, I don't really care if it's ice or rice or any combination of letters you want. But I think, like, if a company already has some sort of quantitative prioritization framework in place, great. But I think that's the important piece, is just having something that helps you somewhat objectively look at different features or different potential projects or experiments, and allows you to weigh them and see, all right, like, do we choose this big project? Do we go all in on this big project because we think the revenue opportunity there is there, or the opportunity, the North Star metric is there, or do we knock out some smaller things? Like, how do we figure that out? And that's my favorite way of figuring it out.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So kind of coming into a company, blank slate, maybe not product-led growth, maybe a complete shit show, what have you. First, let's get a metric that we can all rally around, ideally on the company level, but if need be on the team level, and make sure it's quantitative, make sure we can measure it, make sure it moves the needle in the direction that we want to move as a company. Second, have some ability, some lens, some, again, metric-driven ability to prioritize what we're working on. And again, some of the components that go into that are effort or ease, right? How difficult is it to do the thing? C for
Confidence.
confidence. How likely are we able to actually do the thing that we're talking about? How many variables are under our control versus external factors? And then impact. How much is it going to move the needle against that goal? Are those kind of like the two core pillars? And then, like, making sure you actually do the work and you continue to measure it, or are there other things that kind of come in that you bring out of your tool belt for moving an organization to be more product-led growth?
Those are universally the first two steps. in every case is working on those two things, because that gives us a kind of a ground to run on to start with, and then from there, need to understand what the tool set is. What are we working with? That's always an important piece. Typically, if I'm working with a new company, I want to see. I'm hoping to see a decent product analytics setup. Hopefully something a little bit more than GA, but often that's the case. Is we have to work with. In that case, all right. Hopefully we can get a product analytics suite. I highly recommend companies integrate a CDP. I work with
What's that?
A customer data platform. So companies like Segment, InParticle. There's a whole bunch now. It used to be like a little bit smaller space, but a whole bunch of companies have now kind of opened up forays into it. There's different variations of CDPs. There's things that call themselves other things that do effectively the same thing. But all it is basically it's a middle layer that you kind of layer onto whatever your what's the word I'm thinking of? Whatever I'm just thinking objects, but like whatever your platforms are, whether it be web-based, an app, your data warehouse, anything, sources. You're connecting all your sources. It's a middle layer to connect all of your sources to all of your destinations. Anything that is
pipe in all your data basically across all the things.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly it. It makes life a lot easier. Engineering teams like it. Marketing teams like it. Everybody just gets a lot more efficient, and especially for a small team, it makes life, a lot more efficient. So that's the other thing too. Is after we kind of start to understand, all right, what's our North Star? Do we have a framework, a kind of a prioritization framework in place? What tools do we have to work with? And that's usually the kind of the third step, because it takes a little bit more time. We can get the other things kind of knocked out pretty quick, and we can start to focus on tools and kind of evaluate what's best for that company in particular, whether it be any number of product analytics vendors, a heap, of Amplitude, Mixpanel, like I said before, or a CDP, a Segment, an InParticle, or and then whatever else we need to take a look at. So it's usually like a tool evaluation.
Given you have so much experience in going into company after company and kind of seeing this and doing this, and both, client side, but also now that you're kind of going into, I don't know if you guys call yourself an agency or a growth studio, whatever the term may be, but working with many clients rather than being in-house. Do you have a strongly opinionated preferred stack of, if I had my druthers, I'd always choose Mixpanel. I'd always choose, this tool, kind of down the line? Or is it more of situational? It depends on the context, depends on the company.
It depends on the context and the company. I mean, I probably have some biases on my part, just through experience, but I think in most cases it kind of depends. I mean, for the most part, like when you talk about some of those tools in those areas, like you talk about products analytics suites, for the most part they're the same. And I don't know how many sales calls I've hopped on with all of them, but I'll have those conversations, and it's like, listen, I like 90% of the stuff that I need is all going to be the same stuff, but that 10% can make a difference, and that 10% can be unique. One company might need that 10% more than another company. So I think all three of those like product analytics companies that I mentioned are all great products. C2B companies I mentioned are great products. I like working with all of them. I think it's really that, but it's that last 10% that that can be the difference for a different for an individual startup. So you kind of have to figure that out and see what works best for them.
What's the coolest product you've ever built?
Oh man, there's a few.
What and again, maybe it's something you've worked on, you didn't build from scratch, or but kind of what flavor is your favorite flavor?
There's so many. Minibar was a really fun one. That was during COVID, and that was such a wild time for everybody. But also an alcohol delivery company during COVID was fun.
Bet business was booming.
Yeah, it did well. Yeah. So that was a fun one. Clark, an ed tech company that my co-founder Sam and I worked at. He co-founded, and I came in later. That was a blast. That was just an amazing team. And I think where that was in the ed tech space. I had very little experience in ed tech, but the people there were that was a blast. That was probably the most fun I ever had at a company. But I've worked in gaming. There was a company called Vulcan. There's a daily fantasy sports betting app for esports back in 2013 or something, and awesome team. That one was just fun. That was a really cool one. So there have been a lot. I mean, there have been so many that, like I've been fortunate enough to get my hands on and play around with, and just like in so many different verticals and different spaces that, yeah, they're all fun. But I don't know. It's tough to figure out like specifically what product is the coolest one to help build. But
a little bias based on team and
yeah,
where you were in your life kind of thing.
Yeah. But it's also, I think the biggest thing is the people that you work with. I think, like I could work on a really dumb product, but if I'm working with really great people, then like, who cares? It's fun.
Yeah.
So that's where I've been incredibly fortunate in my career. I think I've just always worked with great, really cool, fun people, smart people more than anything else. Just like I've been very lucky in that sense. So
I don't know if I came up with this or if I stole it from someone and then forgot I stole it from them, but I always say that life's too short to work with shitty people. It's just,
yeah.
if you're working with someone who's not great, either if you're in control, move on and let them go, or
Yeah.
if you're not in control, maybe you move on and let the company go.
Yeah.
But
I'll co-sign that one for sure.
Yeah. Elijah quote 2023.
Yeah.
We can it's on the record now officially.
Yeah. I love it.
How's the transition been from, you named a few different companies that you were working at, you've been working at full-time capacity or in a more dedicated capacity. And now with Honest, you're kind of flipping the script and you're saying, okay, well, we're going to work with numerous companies, right? And, how has that transition been? How has it been to kind of, rather than deep diving for, a few years at a time per company to, okay, well, now I have to kind of build the playbook, build the process, and build this repeatable system?
This has been, we haven't been at this too long, but like, it feels like the beginnings of my career all over again. I mean that like in the best ways, like when you're just, it almost feels like you're a kid, like, there's so many things. It's things that we've done and we know so well, but it feels so fresh and like just generally fun. Like I don't know if I've had this much fun working. I mean, like I said, I've been really fortunate. I've worked with great people and I've had a blast doing it. But kind of doing it our way is, yeah, it's just fun. It's just a really
freedom in that.
Yeah, there's a freedom in that. And yeah, and it's amazing. And I think kind of going back to, all the people that I've worked with, it's like, that's been one of the really cool things is as we've gotten this started, having so many people reach out and be like, why didn't you do this sooner, Alex? Like you guys have been, you're 5 years, 10 years behind. You should have done this a long time ago. Like you're made for it. You guys are going to kill it. And just all the support and love we've gotten from everybody. And it's just been we're a few months into it. It's been a ride, it's been too much fun. And, hopefully we get to keep doing this for a long time because it feels, to put it lightly, it feels right. So
good.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic to hear. One of the things I've been curious about is, you and I have gotten to know each other. Well, you, Sam, and I have gotten to know each other a little bit for the past 6 months or something like that. And there's a certain amount of domain knowledge that is helpful in understanding what you do. And I guess my question is, how do you communicate? How do you sell what you do? And maybe you're not even trying to sell it. Maybe you're only talking to people who already know your ability and they're looking for, okay, I need product-led growth and product management and I need support on that. But it's something that I feel like it's not just like, I do marketing. Oh, I understand what you do. I do sales. Oh, I get that. I build software. Oh, I get that. I do product-led growth alignment. It's like, what?
Yeah.
And then it has to be a 5-minute conversation. Do you have kind of this this gap of people not knowing exactly what it is you do, and kind of, or is most of the time you're talking to people who already understand the pain and problem that they're having, and then they're seeking you out directly?
1000%. We have a gap in people that have no idea what we're talking about. If I start a conversation saying that I work on product led growth or I do product led growth, I usually get, oh, okay. That's usually the response. What is that? It's people really don't know. And what's been interesting too is like, neither Sam nor we're not salespeople. We just aren't. We're product or growth people. And that's if we're trying to sell anything, that's really what I'd lean into. It's like, listen, I'm not a salesperson. I can't sell you anything. I couldn't sell a damn thing. But and if you don't want it, fine. Yeah, I don't care. I'll, like, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to waste mine, which makes me a terrible salesperson, I guess, in that sense. But I know we're really good at what we do. And so if somebody tells me what their growth problem is, and that's usually how I have a conversation with somebody. All right, well, what's your growth problem? Forget about what product that growth is. Just tell me what your growth problem is. That's all we need. That's all I need to have a conversation about. If somebody tells me that, I go, okay, well, have you thought about this? Okay, how's your retention look? All right, do we want to have the product market fit conversation? Do we even agree on what product market fit is? Like, do you have? We're going to have a different definition. Probably everybody does. So it's like, all right, well, let's talk about that. Let's see, like, how's your retention? What's your onboarding look like? I don't even talk. We're not even going to talk about marketing stuff, and be very upfront. It's like, listen, this isn't a marketing conversation. Like we said earlier, your growth strategy is your product strategy. If you're having growth problems, what's your product strategy look like? That's what I care about. And if we can figure out what that looks like, then I think we can probably answer a lot of your growth problems, or at least a couple of them, and we'll go from there. So,
I like how you talked about, earlier in your career, you started in marketing, then you went to user acquisition, and then you ultimately ended up in product growth.
Yeah.
I think that there's this natural kind of gap with marketing specifically, where I have a good friend who, she always talks about, she's in marketing, and she talks about how she would work with companies and she could build this amazing marketing strategy and she could build ad campaigns, but if the product is shit, if there's no, you can advertise all you want, but like, you need to fix the problem upstream. And I think that that's kind of what you were talking about, is it's the merging of multiple disciplines, multiple areas of business coming together and saying, product alignment, let's all focus on the same thing. And then through that, then it can go back out to sales, it can go back out to marketing, and those things become more empowered by kind of having this lens. But I think it's pretty cool to kind of hear, it's definitely not marketing. You are not just growth hacking or marketing by a different name. It's truly saying, we have an alignment problem. Let's figure out our alignment, and then how do we measure it, and then achieve those results.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. That's exactly right. And I think one of the other kind of interesting conversations that we have that comes up when you talk about product led growth with people is that, usually starts off as a conversation around really more kind of like a little bit more singular, and we're just talking about growth, and the mindset is really on the acquisition side of things. But at some point, it gets pretty interesting when you start to talk about what a product led growth company actually looks like in full, a fully matured, fully evolved, version of a product led growth company, where the product really is the center. It's talk about a hub and spoke model. It's the hub. It's around everything. Every team is acting based on the product. Essentially, everybody's contributing to the product. Your sales team is contributing to the product. They're feeding your product people all the information they're getting. They're feeding your marketing team. It's a really cohesive unit. So I think one of the more interesting things that you see is, even though your conversation might start on the marketing side of things, what sometimes happens, and this is when, like I said, like, this is when it gets to this point, it's the most fun, is when you start to see your entire company shift, and you're not siloed anymore. You're not having these teams that are all focused on individual efforts. You notice that, like, oh, this is actually like your company's operating in a completely different way, and it's much more efficient. And I'm a little biased, but it's better.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a question of, how do you structure a business more than anything else? How do you structure a business around a product, and then make decisions through that lens, rather than being a department inside of an organization or something like that?
Yeah.
For this space, if people wanted to learn more about product-led growth or get more skilled in it or even understand what the hell it is, what is out there by way of resources, YouTube channels, books? I mean, obviously it's probably newer in concept or maybe newer in being named. How do people learn more about being more product-led growth focused?
There's a lot of good resources out there, and especially I'd say over the course of the last year or two, it's become even more prevalent. Um, if you really want to get serious to learn about it, Reforge has been putting on amazing classes covering the covering product led growth with the best of the best. I mean, some of the people that put on those classes are, it's top talent, like top industry talent in the world that's leading some of that. Brian Balfour and Andrew Chen put that together. I don't even know how many years ago now, but that's the program I recommend to everybody that really wants to learn more about it. It costs something. They actually have artifacts now that you can learn a lot just by going through there. It's you can check out. I try to put usually any new hires that I have, I try to put through Reforge. So that's a great resource. Less kind of class heavy. We were talking about Amplitude and Segment and some of those companies earlier. Some of them have started to distribute marketing material that, while it is focused on those companies, it's great material about PLG efforts. I think Amplitude in particular has done a really good job kind of promoting that and talking about it, and just like talking about how they go about it and some of the work that they do. Some great books. Hacking Growth by Sean Ellis and Morgan Brown is one that I often buy that for a lot of new hires and send it their way. They also cover ICE, or Sean Ellis covers ICE in that. I think that's where I first got it, actually. The Cold Start Problem by Andrew Chen is a great book. It's not specifically about product-led growth necessarily, but it is about that, without calling it out exactly. Yeah, so there's a few. You can also just Google product-led growth, and there's some good stuff out there too. Or you can email me, Alex@honestprod. And I used to teach a couple classes about product-led growth and growth marketing efforts for early stage startups, and I have a ton of material that I still distribute to people that ask for it. So happy to send that out if anybody wants anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, first of all, I'll be doing some Googling or ChatGPTing to enhance my knowledge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's helpful to have just because resources, I think diving deep can be very helpful. And then obviously, yeah, if anyone wants to work directly with Alex and his co-founder, Sam, who I had on the podcast a few weeks ago, great guys. Really cool to see what you guys are doing with Honest, and maybe I'll hit you up for some of those materials myself.
For sure.
Thanks for coming on the show. And if anyone else wants to get in touch with you beyond email, do you tweet? Do you X? Do you any other socials out there to connect with you on?
LinkedIn is the best one for me these days. I've been on a largely social media detox for most of this year, trying to keep that somewhat consistent. But LinkedIn, I'm still active on. I will reply on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.